first I thought before we get too far into varieties, we need to talk a little bit about apple culture. And so I want you to understand a little bit about rootstock hardiness. That really determines what kind of growth and survivability you're going to get out of your apple trees. And so with that in mind, you can go through a lot of different catalogs. We're going to have a little discussion when we started today with one of you. And you can find all kinds of some common varieties of apple trees that you can grow here that say they're on a dwarf rootstock. And suffice it to say, I don't think you're going to have the best success by using a dwarf rootstock. You'll have all these different types of rootstocks that work really good for dwarfing our standard trees if you're in zones 5 and 6. But they aren't fully hardy here. More often than not, our standard trees are growing on a hardy rootstock like a dogwood crabapple, for example. And that's fully hardy. And so from that standpoint, don't, in my opinion, purchase trees that are, unless they're a natural dwarf, don't purchase them thinking you're going to get a Harrelson or a name of variety that's going to be dwarfed because the rootstock is going on and have to survive. I don't think you're going to have any success. So my advice is to just go with standard varieties unless they're a natural dwarf like Hazen or something like that. Then you don't have an issue. But the better way to handle it is buy your standard versions and then do something like espalier with them, or something if you have a limited amount of space in your backyard and you want to grow some of these varieties. You can do a lot of pruning and still have really good success to keep a standard tree. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is pollination. You do have to have something in the Malus family, the Malus genus, that blossoms at the same time your apple tree is blossoming. Does that have to be an apple tree? No. Can it be a flowering crab? Yes. Can it be a regular crab? Yes. As long as they're blossoming about the same time. So if you're growing trees that regular fruit about mid-September and they're blossoming, make sure that whatever type of pollinator that you're growing is going to be blossoming or sending out its blossoms at the same time in the spring, whether it's a crab apple or another apple, as the one that you want to produce food for. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is spacing. I know in a backyard situation, it's real easy to crowd stuff together. And when you do that, then you're going to end up with a situation like this. And these are actually way too close together. You can work it though by doing pruning, but most people don't do the amount of pruning that they need to do, and then they run into trouble. They run into trouble with breakage, they run into branch breakage, they run into trouble with trees becoming diseased because there's not enough air movement going through them. You should actually be able to see directly through your apple tree. You can't see through these apple trees. Well, some old timers will say you can take your cap off and throw it through it, and that's how thin it should be. Some will say you should be able to throw a cap through it. And I should be throwing caps anyway. But at any rate,
that's because you work with trees.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to hurt your trees. But the thing is, the take home is you got to have some air movement through the tree. And you got to be able to penetrate with a little bit of light. So you do have to do some pruning. And you want to use some proper spacing. So 25 feet is about the best spacing that you can get. Now, that said, if you've got a small yard and you want to grow a lot of different types of apple trees, there's a few things you can do. We're not going to get into grafting, but you can do some grafting. It's not that difficult. We put 3 or 4 different varieties on one tree. The other thing you can do is, like I said earlier, make them into a fan, flat shaped, and an espalier. Just look that word up. It's a lot of fun work to grow as well. And you can grow standard sized trees in a much smaller space. When you're planting, let's say that you're going to start out with a whip of some sort. You do have to do some pruning. I know you're planting shade trees, the common knowledge is to not do a whole lot of pruning because you have to allow those roots to replenish their nutrients, their reserves. So the common wisdom is to shade tree, for example, you don't do a lot of pruning. That's a little bit different with an apple tree. You've got to get started pruning right away in order to get that nice branching structure established. If you don't do that, then you're going to end up with some problems. So take out these diseased roots. You know, wherever you make a nice clean cut on a bare root tree, I used to have a nursery where you prune the roots almost as much as you prune the branches. You make a nice clean cut there, you're going to get a whirl of new roots coming out, nice little fibrous roots. On the other hand, you leave a potentially could cause problems for you. It might get some diseases going on there, probably not. But you won't get the advantage of having a nice clean cut there and getting those new roots established.
How do you cut the roots? Do you use like a spade or something to go around? Or
Well, I'm assuming I'm talking primarily about a bare lip plant.
Oh, before.
And just with a good green shoot, nice sharp green shoots.
So they don't get too tall.
You know, when we used to sell trees, they would come from the nursery, from the wholesale nursery, looking like that. That's about as bad of a situation as you can get. You have to immediately get to work on that, and you end up something that's not structurally sound at all if you don't prune that. Your branches are going to fill with apples eventually. What's worse than a sharp V crotch like that? Nothing. You're going to split the tree right down the center, or wherever those V crotches are with all that weight. It's a structurally unsound kind of branch crop situation. So you do want to start to develop those nice wide V crotches as soon as you can. So start this type of, if you have to hang a clothespin on them or tie some string on them to escape, get those branches separated, this is the time to do it. Don't let them mature like this because it will be nothing but a problem. And then you'll see that when you do have a broken branch, the diseases and other problems can develop, and your tree will never be healthy. So start by the way training it the way it needs to be trained. This is the way, if you were to look at it from the top, your tree should look, your apple tree should look. You want nice wide crotches like this. And you want sort of a wagon, sort of a spoked wagon wheel appearance if you're looking at it from the top. And on top, from these branches, then these structural branches are where all those are your load-bearing branches, and that's where all those are the branches that are going to support the weight of your tree. I prefer bare root whenever I can get them. I think if you, there's just a lot of advantages in trying to treat bare root. But if you can't get bare root, obviously you can get potted trees that pot later on in the spring. Most nurseries will pot their bare root trees in the latter part of the spring, and then you can purchase them for potting later on in the year. The important thing to remember about that is that you take, whether it's a plant that's been in the container for more than a year, or a plant that was just recently planted, you need to separate those roots out. The longer that plant has been in that container, the more prone it is to have girdling roots. And the roots start to circle around inside of that container. Take it out, plop it in the ground. You won't notice anything taking place the first 2 or 3 years. But inside of 4 or 5 years, you're going to have what looks like a telephone pole there instead of a nice wide roots there at the bottom. A good strong wind will come along and snap it right off. So you've got to separate those roots, even if it means getting a little tough and mean on that tree. You've got to separate them off. I take a utility knife and slice down around that root ball after I get it out of the pot at least 8 times, at least 1 inch deep. Try and pull those roots up. Yeah, you lose some soil. It's not the best thing for the tree in the short term, but it's the best thing for the tree in the long term. So you do have to separate it. Better yet, just plant bare root, and you don't have to worry about that because you can see right away what your tree's roots are going to look like. And this is a nice, really nice bare root looking plant here. The easiest way to get them out of the container is to take a knife and cut that bottom off. Don't try to save those containers. They're cheap. You don't need to buy them really small. Cut the bottom off and slice down the side and separate. And then get tough enough to start separating the roots and cutting them apart.
I see a lot of trees that get quite tall, and you do a ladder or a monkey look and pick the fruit. Is there anything wrong with just topping them so they don't get 20 feet or 15 feet tall?
You know, that's a really good question, Scott. Now, there's a difference between topping and doing some heading back and judicious pruning. Topping, that's definitely something you want to avoid because you're going to do more harm than will good for your tree and eventually probably kill your tree. But use a process called drop crotch pruning where you just drop down to the crotch area that will get you to the height which your tree's most likely where you want it. So drop down to the next nearest crotch and cut it off there. Don't just whack it off wherever you feel like it should be cut off. Because if you do that, that's going to develop a lot of quick shoots and growth, and those will be structurally unsound and be weak, and they'll start to break and snap off too if they ever do start to bear fruit. So drop crotch pruning. So let's say that this is a branch crotch here. Where if you cut right here or right there, and you wouldn't cut right straight across. And if you always cut at a crotch, or if it's a small branch, cut at a butt, it'll be okay. Yeah, with apple trees, you do take a few more extreme measures to keep them within bounds, especially when we're kind of relegated to using the standard sizes. They're hard to kill. They're easy to mess up though.
Yeah, but I mean, for pruning, you were talking, I have no problem anytime. I get towards the spring, all I do is just saw bingo.
Yeah. Yeah. Apple trees are pretty tough trees. You know, when I had my nursery, we were told by the wholesale nursery to plant trees so that you never saw the ground, which was an apple. Actually, doesn't completely wrong. And so for years we planted that way until we finally figured out that's wrong. You need to be planted so you can just barely see the tops of the root flare covered. So that graft should be above ground 3 or 4 or 5 inches. On top of that, we had to dig an extra 6 inches just to get the graft down below the soil line. And those trees survived, but it wasn't the best thing for them. It took them a long time to grow. And as you said, they're tough trees, and what happens is the roots go out, and then before they can ever do anything, they have to come back up to the level where they're comfortable at. I've done that. I did that once with a basket with an American lemon tree, and I couldn't figure out why isn't that sucker growing. And I was just sitting there. All of a sudden, the light bulb went on. I planted the tree, but I never was too long. It was 5 years later. The roots did eventually come out and go up. That was before I got smart. And you do have to plant so that the root flare, whatever kind of tree you're planting, is just barely covered. If you make a mistake on depth, make the mistake of planting it too shallow instead of too deep. You'll be a lot more happy with what's going on. I know I have here don't amend the soil, and if you've just got an overwhelming burning desire to put some well-rotted manure or compost in there, go ahead. But the theory behind that is that if you amend the soil, and if you didn't dig your hole wide enough, then the roots are never going to want to get out and toughen up. They're just going to stay put there. So I prefer not, unless it's just pure clay that I'm trying to do, I don't ever amend the soil. I just stick them in the ground. If they make it, they make it. If they don't, well, that tree doesn't want to spend its time there. So I use the soil. I put the soil that I dug out of the hole back in the hole, and that's about a nice diameter of an apple. Any thin-skinned tree, whether it's an apple tree or a pear or a plum, they're real susceptible to SUNSCALD damage, not to mention bulls, and rabbits, and deer. I've got a tree I'll show you in 2 minutes. It's a northern lights. That thing is coming up on, it's 8 years old now. And it's about 3 or 4 feet tall. And it's got the nicest little trunk on it. Deer, the rabbits, and the mice, and the sparrow. So, and I've done everything I can. Finally, it's just tough enough. It's surviving. I put tree wrap on it, up 4 feet off the ground. The deer come along and chew it off. I put more tree wrap on, the snow builds up. The rabbits come along and stand on their hind feet on the top of the snowbank, on the tree wrap, and chew it off. And if you don't put tree wrap on, the mice will get the stem. So you'll have to just take that into consideration. Now, if you just don't want to put tree wrap on, but you still want to protect your tree from some SUNSCALD, I would suggest putting a little bit of white paint, latex paint, just looking at the south and southwest sides, because the sun is really tough on it in the summertime. The sun has a much more direct angle that it can get in there and cause some SUNSCALD damage on that trunk in the summertime, in the wintertime versus the summertime. So if you do nothing else, protect them from the SUNSCALD. Shoot, just get some cardboard or narrow strip of plywood in the just a little, create some shade on it, and that'll help a lot as well. But ideally, because of the tree wrap on, then you get all the benefits. Critter protection as well as SUNSCALD protection.
I tried some of that orange snow fence. It looks like Charlie Brown Christmas tree, but it tends to help deer. You know, the branches sticking out, they'll still nibble that off, but they won't. They haven't knocked it down. Nobody's saved it yet.
Was that on apple trees or on
that apple?
Other things to be aware of, as Kathy mentioned, the spotter with the softball. I get the problem on apples.
Not apples, but plums.
Okay.
I saw the damage, but this may look really old.
Okay.
We know we'll have an idea, but maybe a dozen apples per tree.
If you've ever had apple maggots in your apples, you know it's not much fun. And the reason I throw this in here is because I get people coming to my office every year with these apples, and they're all kind of bumpy and warty, but not really warty, but they're kind of bumpy. And they look like they have acne. They've got all these pimples everywhere. And they say, which one of my apples? And I'll take out my pocket and I can cut them open. Point out all the little railroad tracks left in there from the apple maggots. The only thing worse than that, I know you guys heard this joke a hundred times, is finding a worm in your apple. Finding half worm, that's even worse, right? So apple maggots are a whole lot of fun. And then they say, what can I do with them? and then hang it in your tree. And when you see the apple maggots, the flies themselves getting stuck to it, because what they're trying to do, the female is trying to lay eggs into what she thinks is an apple. You see that apple maggot fly on there, then you know it's time to either spray or hang a whole bunch more of these in there, and that'll help get them under control. So you can even put a little bit of juice, sugary juice in the bottom of the styrofoam cup, to make it even more attractive.
When should you make
They do start to appear, the flies start hunting for a place to lay their eggs in early July. So you should be putting those traps in your tree by late June, to be on the safe side. And then you can decide if you want to spray, or like I said, you can actually do something like some places they actually, there's the maggot. The fly looks like, and this is what the apples look like. It's a close-up, and over here I think you can see the maggot itself. And I would take precautions in one way or another. If you've got a nice looking apple crop, make sure that doesn't happen. Some people will put plastic bags around their apples, and that's an effective way to do it. For a commercial grower, probably not so much because it's very labor intensive. If you do decide to put a sandwich bag or something around, you do have to make sure they're sealed tight, and then you do want to cut a small hole in the bottom so the moisture can get out of there. Otherwise, you'll have apples, you'll have rotten apples. That is an effective way to do it, and then there's no spraying involved. You don't have to worry about other insects getting into them as well. But have I ever done it just a little bit to see if it would work? But I didn't have patience to go do all the apples. It does work, but it's a lot of labor. Okay, an apple scab. Watch for this. You see that kind of a dingy, drab color, little spots developing. And you're going to have to spray a little bit if you want to keep that from causing these problems on your apples. Now, here's a situation where, yes, you can go ahead and eat your apples. You probably would have a lot of success selling them at a farmer's market, but you can make juice out of them. You can peel them a little bit extra deep, and they're fine to eat. But it's more of my book is more of an annoyance than anything. But you can lose some treatment by spraying something like Capcan. That'll work good. You have to do 2 or 3 sprays, at least 2 if not 3. Starting when they first blossom, during petal fall, and then you probably have to put 1 or 2 more sprays on through the summer, depending on what your weather is doing. This is a fungus, it's one that rainy, humid weather helps to make it worse. In firelight, this can be the bane of your apple tree's existence if you're not careful. So some of the things you'll be looking for are shepherd's crooks, cankers, and branch dieback. And I'll show you just some examples of what a shepherd's crook is supposed to mean. It's supposed to resemble the end of shepherd's staff. But check that. If you see this quick, here's another example here. If you see that happening, then inspect it quickly. And I'm not one for promoting pruning in the summertime, but hey, if it's taking out your branches and it's moving really quick, it seems like some apple firelight infections are worse than others. You might be better off just going ahead and doing some pruning. I stuck this in here because it kind of shows you a little bit about how this disease works. So let's just assume that you've got a canker down here that's got some bacterial ooze in the springtime, and the insects get that on the feet. They carry it up to the flowers, and the flowers get infected. And then you get some branches and twig dieback, or it just kind of cycles around like that. So it's important to get those infected branches out of there. If you don't do that in time, your apple tree probably won't survive, and you'll be disappointed. So this is what the cankers look like, and you'll see bacterial ooze coming out around some of these edges here. So my advice is to plant varieties that are resistant. The varieties that I'm going to talk about, most of them have some fire blight, if not a lot of fire blight resistance. Pruning, try to prune about 5 or 6 inches inside the healthy wood. Make sure that you're sterilizing your pruner between each cut, not just between each tree, with a 1 part bleach to 9 parts water solution. And if you do want to spray to try to prevent it, remember this is just preventative. You can use streptomycin. You have to do that during the blossoming stage, and that will give you some protection. It will not cure a disease that's already there, though. So we'll go to some varieties now. And this one is actually from, I believe it's from Manitoba. Yeah, it's been around a lot of years. It's called MAGGOT. And most of these varieties that I'm going to show you, I've had personal experience with. That doesn't mean there aren't some others that should be on this list, but I'm going to talk about the ones I'm most experienced with. And I've either grown people that are growing them. And so I'd say probably 3/4 of them I'm growing myself. So MAGGOT's a good one. It's very hardy. It's what we call a summer apple. It ripens up about mid-August, and it does have some fire blight resistance to it. But it doesn't store very long. It's only good for about a week. So you better be prepared to make applesauce, apple wine, apple pie. You gotta do something with it quick. It's not gonna last. And it's from Manitoba originally. And then Red Duchess, we used to sell these at the nursery when we were in Williston as well as in Minot. It does have some fire blight resistance to it. Again, it's what I would call a summer apple because it ripens up about mid to late August. And it's not much of a keeper either. It only keeps for about 2 weeks. But it's good. It's good for pies and eating and sauces. Beautiful color on it. Another one is hazen, and I got these photos from Kathy here. Thank you, Kathy, for those. And these were taken right here at the research center. Okay, so hazen is an NDSU introduction. You know, I've kind of had a love-hate relationship with it. And you know why? Because I wasn't pruning it correctly. It does require probably more judicious pruning than other apple trees. It's a natural semi-dwarf. It's very hardy, but again, it's one that ripens up about mid-August, mid to late August. And it will keep a little bit longer than some of the others. It will keep about 4 weeks. But and it's zone 3, fully zone 3 hardy. So if you want something that's going to ripen up fairly early in the season to kind of get your apple season started, this would be a good one. Just remember, it does need to have some pruning because it wants to form these sharp, deep crotches. So you're going to have to take that into account and whack it upside the head a little bit because some pruning once in a while. Otherwise, you'll have some problems. You've got to do that with all your apples. This one in particular, my experience has been, needs a little bit of extra maintenance. But it's a good natural semi-mark. You won't be disappointed by the quality of the fruit, except it doesn't last. The fruit's really good. State Fair, that's a zone 3. It stores a couple of months, and it does have some moderate fire blight resistance to it. Good for fresh eating or cooking. It's got a nice creamy flesh, firm, juicy, aromatic, sweet, fresh there. So it's a good one. I've grown this one myself, but unfortunately I haven't had a lot of fruit on it yet. I'm just starting to get some fruit on it now. And a Welby, this is an old one that's been around for a long time. It does have some susceptibility to fire blight on it, so you have to take that into account. But it's really, really good. It's fresh eating and good cooking. It ripens about mid-September. Will keep about 4 weeks. And just a medium, good-sized, all-around apple. It's got a nice color as well. Sweet 16, a little bit of fire blight resistance. That ripens about mid-September. Fully hardy for our region, zone 3. Kathy says that it takes years and years to bear fruit. Its flesh is yellow and crisp, has a cherry candy flavor. I love your descriptions. Interesting and good.
I read that.
I mean, that's first hand right there. And you have these growing out here, right?
I do. This year is the first year I tasted that cherry flavor. I read it, but that's true.
I know people who have had that 10 years and yet to get an apple.
Well, she said it takes years and years to bear fruit.
I agree.
It's frustrating.
Are there some varieties that tend to bear every year or better than others?
That's a good question, Scott, and I'm just going to digress a little bit on that topic right there. You will see with the Earlsons, they're one of the most notorious ones for on-again, off-again bearing. They'll just kill you with too much apples one year, next year, nothing. Next year, they're overweighted, the branches are breaking, next year, nothing. Some of that can be alleviated, in fact, most of it, by doing some judicious thinning of the fruit. So get out there and separate those apples. You'll have what's called June drop. In June, that'll be a lot of part of it. You get a lot of natural fruit drop because it's just, some of them were improperly, poorly pollinated, some of the fruit, and the fruit just isn't going to be, the tree isn't going to be able to hold all that. But some things you can do is get out there and pull them so they're about, when they're picturing your mind that the apples are going to be 3 or 4 fingers apart. So do a lot of pruning, a lot of thinning. And if you do that, it takes away a lot of the stress on the tree to support all that fruit. And on the flip side of that, then you get good quality fruit, you get larger fruit, and it kind of breaks that cycle of a lot of fruit one year, no fruit next year. You still will have more fruit one year, but you won't have a year typically where you get no fruit. Thinning your fruit is really important whether you're dealing with apples, not so much crab apples, but apples and plums as well. So that's really important to do. And Red Baron, used to sell this one, I've grown it. It's from Minnesota. It was developed in 1970, fully hardy, zone 3. Does have some fire blight resistance, and that again matures about mid-September. It's just a nice, bright red, medium-sized fruit. Good one. You won't go wrong with that one. Carroll This is selected by Bailey Nurseries in Minnesota. It's fully 100% Haralson, but it does have a little bit more intense flavor, a little bit more sugar. It ripens in late September, where Haralson ripens almost into October. So even though this is fully Haralson, it ripens a little bit earlier. And Kathy says that it has some rusting, it's a heavy bear. Do you have a situation, Kathy, with yours where it bears every year?
Every year.
See, that's one. See, Haralson, the parent plant, does that on again, off again thing with this one, and that's been my experience. Also, it bears every year. I had a barrel right on my tree until I had a guy replacing the septic system and knocked it over with the tackle. It was doing really well. What nice thing about it is the fruits really store. I used to be able to keep my fruits into March. You know, if you keep them cool, refrigerate, they'll last all winter long.
What's rusting?
That's that kind of a, it's almost a type of a scabby-like appearance on the surface of the skin. It's nothing to really worry about.
Except this year we didn't have much rusting on these Harold Reds, and they've been keeping well, but last year we had a lot of rusting, and they didn't keep well at all. Like the moisture transpired out through that quirky russet.
Okay. So you think the rusting had some impact?
Definitely, because you can see actually it's softening around the